Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Dog Pound South podcast, part of the Fanatical Elves Network, which is part of the Fans First Network. I'm Steve Gill, and your host. And training camp starts finally, the much anticipated training camp. Rookies report on Wednesday. The other players will be in West Virginia on the 22nd. Then we'll start getting images of practices. I think they have 4 days starting on Wednesday it's called acclimation. It's part of the CBA. But we'll be getting practice videos. So last week I had mentioned that I heard a few things here or there, that pertain to the Browns, mostly it pertains to Jim Schwartz, our new defensive coordinator. First of all, let me say, of all the additions, Jim Schwartz is probably the most important. We went from a secondary-based defense under Joe Woods, which analytics says beef up your secondary, and that's what Andrew Berry did. But Joe Woods overcomplicated things. He didn't use players in the right positions. John Johnson III comes to mind. Now we're going to a defensive line heavy, pressure heavy defense. And before you say, oh, great, no more analytics. No. Jim Schwartz is a big believer in analytics. So it got that from Bill Belichick, who's also a big believer in analytics. So they're going to from a secondary heavy with complicated zones, which not even smart, intelligent players could understand, to a more simplistic pressure, defensive line, man coverage. I heard Jim Schwartz in an interview call it, we want to lead the league in badassery. I love that. I'm surprised somebody in Cleveland hasn't made a T-shirt out of that yet. Now's your chance. So, big addition, Jim Schwartz. In the offseason, the Browns signed 14 veterans and had 7 draft picks. So that's 21 new players. Not all of them are going to make the team. The draft picks probably are, unless they get injured. But that's a lot of players. On the defensive side, who are the most important ones of those 21 players? On the defensive side, you could say Tomlinson, the big defensive tackle. I'm going to say Zadarius Smith. He can play inside. He can play outside. He can pressure. 3 out of the last 4 years, he's had a great year. 1 year, he got injured early, but he played all 16 games 3 out of the last 4 years. Like I said, he can play inside. He can pressure the quarterback on the outside. He's big enough to do both. I just think, plus he's a veteran, I just think his presence on that defensive line will help the younger players like Elliott and Togiai, if Togiai makes the team, and also help Myles Garrett. Now, on offense, I'm going Elijah Moore. I have loved Elijah Moore since he was at Ole Miss. I think he's going to have a large impact on the offense. I think you're going to see, I know you're going to see him lined up everywhere. He might even be in the stand selling peanuts during halftime. Who knows? He is this versatile of a weapon. I know Deshaun Watson likes to throw the ball a lot to running backs and tight ends, and he and Amari Cooper have been working out more in the offseason. But I just think that this offense with Elijah Moore in it is going to be 100% better. So I had mentioned earlier, I had heard some stuff on defense. I heard that Jim Schwartz, and this is the only player I've got with a name. I heard way early before OTAs that Jim Schwartz likes Tony Fields, linebacker, special teams player. Had a great game, first game back for Watson in Houston. I've also heard there are players on the defense that he likes that the fans aren't too hot about. I like this idea. I know Jim Schwartz knows talent, so he's going to make best use of what he's got. So, some people will say my personal one that I am not a fan of, and I was when he came out of Ohio State, it was Tommy Togiai. I thought he is just he has gotten worse every year. I thought he should have been cut last year. But coming out of Ohio State, he was a great technician at defensive tackle. He may not be the biggest guy in the world, but he had great hands, quick hands. And he used his hands and leverage to get around offensive linemen. So I don't know if Schwartz is going to keep Togiai. I got a feeling Elliott's going to make the team because he restructured his contract and he's getting some more guaranteed money this year. So I have a feeling he's going to make the team. So speaking of 53-man roster, I've already written a couple articles for clevelandsportstalk.com. I did one a way too early 53-man roster, and I did one after mini camps were over. So I thought, since listening to Cleveland radio and looking on the internet, I see a lot of people talking about 53-man roster going into training camp. All right. Offense. I got 25 guys on offense, 25 guys on defense, and of course your 3 special teamers. Let's get those out of the way. It's going to be York. It's going to be Bajorquez, and it's going to be Charlie Hewitt as the long snapper, unless somebody gets hurt. So, offense, 25 players. They're going to have to keep 3 quarterbacks. In the past 2 years, they've only kept 2 and had one on the practice squad. But this year, they're going to have to keep 3. Of course, Deshaun Watson, and of course, Josh Dobbs. Josh Dobbs got a fully guaranteed 2-year contract, so he's going to be your number 2. Your number 3 is going to be the rookie Dorian Thompson-Robinson. They will not be able to slip him through waivers to put him on the practice squad. Maybe they will. Maybe they could. This year, the one and final cut from 90 to 53 happens after the last preseason game. Used to, they'd stagger it. This time, every team's going to have to go down from 90 to 53 on the same day. It's going to be interesting. But he's not going to slip through. And also on game day, they have the new rule with the emergency quarterback, designated designated game day emergency quarterback. He doesn't count against the 46-man roster on game day. It's an additional player that you can add. So they can keep him and then designate him the emergency quarterback. Running back. I've got 3. The last 2 years, Andrew Berry has kept 5. 2 years ago, he had 4 running backs and a fullback. Last year, he had 5 running backs, and one was Demetric Felton, who was listed as a running back, wide receiver. This year, I see him keeping 3. Definitely, of course, Nick Chubb and Jerome Ford. Those are your 1 and 2. Now, Demetric Felton, I'm not sure if they're going to keep him or not. If a veteran that they really like comes available, I think they'll wait to see how he does in preseason games. Maybe prior to the third one before Philly. If he's playing well, I think they might keep him. But if they can get their hands on a veteran, he might be cut and they'll take a veteran. He could pass waivers and make it to the practice squad. All right. Tight end 3, Njoku, Atkins, Harrison Bryant. There's your 3 tight ends. They've always kept 3 tight ends except the first year. The first 53-man roster had 4 tight ends, and that was quickly changed after the first game. Offensive linemen, 2 centers. Of course, Posick. When he played, he was a top 5 center. And I'm going with Luke Whippler, the Ohio State draft pick. He won't pass through waivers. They are very high on him. Callahan's very high on him. I know Nick Harris needs a a break, but I'm going to be interested to see if Nick Harris plays any guard during the preseason. Because if that happens, they may keep Nick Harris as a guard. Speaking of guards, Teller, Batonio, Dunn, and either Harris or Forbes. That's 4. That's pretty straightforward. Tackles, you're going Wills, Conklin, Hudson, and DeJuan Jones. DeJuan Jones makes it over the 2 veterans they signed, Gossett and Martin, because, like I said, he won't pass through waivers. Somebody will grab him. He was listed as a first-round talent. So, well, that's it. So he's got to make the roster, and let's see what Bill Callahan can do with him. So that's the offense, 25 players. Let's take a quick break and come back, and I'll give you my defense. Okay, defense. This is where it gets a little tricky. How many defensive linemen do you keep? Well, in the past 2 years, they've kept 9. Both those years, they had Clowney, who could play inside and outside. He wasn't, he didn't come out of college as a big sack guy. He came out of college as a run-stopping defensive end. He could set the edge, and he proved that with his big highlight in the bowl game of hitting the Michigan running back and knocking his helmet off. But I'm going to go on these lines as well. I've seen some people list 10 because you're going to get into some interesting numbers with some interesting players at defensive tackle. Tomlinson, Elliott, Sika Ika, the draft pick. And this is where I'm not sure if Perion Winfrey is going to make this team or not. All the offseason trouble he's had. If Maurice Hurst, one of the veterans they signed, can stay healthy, he would make the team because he's probably the second best defensive tackle and third best defensive lineman on this roster. He is that good, that talented. So that's 4. And a defensive end, I have 5 players. Of course, Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith, Obo Okoronkwo. Who else? Alex Wright and Isaiah McGuire, the draft pick. So I know Isaiah Thomas played fairly well last year, but that's pretty much set. You got Smith who can play defensive tackle, play defensive end. Linebackers, I have 6 linebackers. JOK, Anthony Walker, Taki, Tony Fields, who I mentioned, Kuzanik, and Adams, both the special teamers. They signed Adams as it looked like that was a Bubba Ventrone move. Those are my 6. The only way this will change is if Taki's not ready at the beginning of the season and they have to put him on the PUP list. That would open the door for Jacob Phillips or somebody else to make the team. I got a feeling I don't think Taki's going to be ready. I think they need to take their time with him. When he came in after all the linebacker injuries they had, he played extremely well. So I don't know. But if he's healthy, makes the team. I also have 6 corners. Of course, Ward, Newsome, Emerson, draft pick Mitchell, AJ Green, and the special teamer Ford they signed. That's pretty straightforward. I think that's a strong group. And 4 safeties, Delpit, Thornhill, McLeod. And here's where it gets a little weird. DeAnthony Bell played well last year, but then you've got the 2 Ohio State kids who came in. They might be able to, Hickman may be able to dethrone Anthony Bell as the 4th corner. It's going to be a great competition to see what happens. And like I for special teamers are pretty much set. For 46 out of the 53 spots are pretty much set in stone, barring injury. So that only leaves 7 available positions, and it's all backups. That's a good problem to have. So that's my early 53-man roster. Barring injury, those should be the guys that start. Like I said, running back is still a toss-up, the third string running back. I think the defensive line is pretty well set. The offensive line maybe at center. Hopefully nobody will get hurt. The guard position between Forbes and Harris, if Harris can play guard. He did, I think, his first couple of years at Washington before he moved to center. Secondary set pretty much on defense, linebacker. All depends on Taki and his health. So that's what I think. That's what I see as the 53-man roster. So training camp finally starts. We finally get to see the videos. We finally get to see the players on the field. I love the idea of going to West Virginia to get out of Berea. Paul Brown was one of the first football coaches in the NFL to take his team away from the city for training camp. He preferred colleges because classrooms. Now a lot of teams do get away, some don't. They like to have their training facilities near the cities where they live because the players live here in the off season. But this is a great bonding experience. It gets the player's head in the right spot when you're starting, when you're having a new offense and a new defense. The first 8 days, very important. Get away from the distractions, although there will be reporters there, but get away from the family and all your friends and just stick to football. I'm sure they're going to have some group activities like bowling and stuff like that. That's always good. Gives a little more cohesiveness, your teammates. So training camp's finally here. We're finally going to see actual football, pads, helmets, the whole routine. Knock on wood for players' health. I just can't wait. This is the exciting time to be a Browns fan. It really is. Start of training camp, start of the season, a little bit more anxious, a little more anxiety. Hopefully they'll carry on the tradition they did last year by winning their first game, only the second time they've done it since '99. And they had to hold on to do it. But I'd like to see a nice decisive win over the Bengals week 1. But, that's such a so anxious. But training camp's here. Luckily, I've got it set up so I can watch the games either on my laptop. Don't ask me how I'm doing it. I'm not going to tell you. There are ways out there that you can stream games without having to pay a fortune. So just think European streaming services. Then we move on. First game, Hall of Fame game. I doubt we'll see any starters, which is good. Let's save them for that week 3 matchup in Philly and the practices beforehand. That's a good measuring stick for this team. So that's it for this week. Episode 5, Dog Pound South podcast, part of the Fanatical Elves Network. I asked you to, I'm on Twitter at Seatown Thug. I'm also on Threads at Seatown Thug. So, and we have other great shows. Johnny Cleveland podcast, Any Given Sunday, Browns Blitz, What the Elf, Football Philosophy, and Rocket Science. Click on any of our shows and you will be not only entertained, but you will gather a wealth of knowledge about the Browns, because that's what we are. We're Browns fans just like you. So follow the the Fanatical Elves Network, and I hope you enjoyed today's show. And I'll see you next week. We'll finally have some training camp under our belt, so I can make some comments about it. So, thank you for listening and watching, and go Browns.